I think that readers are smarter than that. Maybe what drew them in for book one isn't what's going to keep them there for book five. And many times the publisher gets it really right, but a lot of times they get it really wrong. When your manuscript is complete and you have edited it beyond your ability to edit it any further, and then you edit it again, that's when you query.
Duvall Osteen is a literary agent who champions debut, award-winning, and best-selling authors. In our conversation today, she walks through whether a debut author actually needs a social media presence or whether all of that is a waste of time. She walks through when you know that you are ready to start querying your book, and then she also speaks about how she goes about the process of representing an author from signing them to the point of them getting their book published. I'm excited for you to listen in on the chat, so let me introduce you to Duvall. Could you please walk me through the turning points that led you to the point of deciding to become an agent?
Of course. So for a few years, I was studying to be a historian. And I was working as a research historian and living in a university town. And then I knew I needed a pivot and I knew I loved to read. So I did this course called the Columbia Publishing course that introduced me to a variety of different career paths in publishing. And there was this one woman who came to give a talk. I'd never heard of a literary agent before. I just didn't know anything about book publishing other than I loved books. So there's an agent came through. Her name is Amy Williams. She's a wonderful agent. I think she has her own agency now. And she was talking about her relationship with her authors. And she mentioned this author that I loved. And I had worked also as a bookseller at an independent bookstore. And this was an author that I read a lot. He's a Southern author named William Gay. And she was talking about her relationship with this man. It turned out to be William Gay. I was like, oh my gosh, you can have a relationship with writers and you can be a part of their lives. And I think that was the second or third day of the Columbia Publishing course. And I told the head of the course, this woman, brilliant woman named Lindy, who passed away a few years ago. I said, that's it, I'm done. I don't even really need to stay here. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a literary agent. So it was once I learned that it was a possibility, I was all in.
When you got into the role of being a lit agent, was there ever an expectation gap? Like, did you think it was going to be something and then it turned out to be something else? Or was it always what you envisioned the job being?
Every single day, I think it's going to be something and it's something else. And that is and that is the most interesting part of the job. I will say, rather naively, very early on, I thought that I was going to have a lot more time built into my day to read. That is not real. But I do read a lot. But otherwise, I think the energizing and sometimes exhausting part of this career is how varied it can be because you're working with a wide range of personalities and artists and material, and they all are in different stages of their careers and publication processes. And so you're getting hit with a million different things at a million different times.
You mentioned they're working with a variety of different authors in different parts of their careers. When it comes to debut authors, have you picked up anything specifically that they get right and maybe some things that they get wrong about the role of a literary agent?
More and more, the authors who I represent, and quite a few of them do come from MFA programs, but I would say my list is squarely divided between those who come from MFAs and those who don't. And so I think MFA programs and also like now these kind of great forums and organizations online that writers can get involved in answer a lot of questions about the role of a literary agent. And so a lot of people come quite informed. I mean, actually, this podcast is a perfect example. I mean, people are able to access information like they weren't even 10 years ago. That was kind of siloed to squarely in the MFA realm. And now people understand the basic tenets of what a literary agent can do for you. I represent predominantly literary fiction, and so a lot of the questions that I know we're going to go through, the answers vary based on genre, and I want to kind of be really clear about that. And agenting is a very personal relationship, or at least the way that I agent is quite personal, and so my approach is tailored to my authors, and so they'll come to me. And I usually ask them, when they're looking for an agent, I'll say, what kind of relationship are you looking for? As a foundation, like this is a business relationship, right? We are entering into a business arrangement together, but how do you want to conduct your business? Do you want someone who works with you this way, or are you looking for something a little different, perhaps like a little more hands off or a little more hands on? What is it that's going to work for you? And I think that catches a lot of authors off guard because while they do have information about what a literary agent does, it can be a much more tailored approach with me, at least. And I think with a lot of agents prefer it that way.
You mentioned, I think, MFA. Could you just explain what that is? I actually haven't heard of
Oh,
that
of
before.
course. MFA is a Master's of Fine Arts. It's a writing program. I think they're much bigger here in the US, but it's a graduate program specifically for writers. And so if you want an advanced degree in writing, there are a lot of programs that you are either offered a scholarship to go to or you pay to go to, and it's kind of a concentrated few years where you can work on your writing. And I think there's a lot of merit to the time that those programs give you to read and hone your craft, but I do not think that they're right for everyone.
From your experience, what would you say is the ratio of people who you've maybe read or represent that have come from programs like that versus people who just find writing later on in life?
I'd say my list is about a little more than 50-50, um, swaying towards non-MFA students, which is interesting for literary fiction because I think that literary fiction really can lean into those MFA programs. Some of my authors have the degrees and they are remarkable, and many of them don't. And actually, I do have quite a few writers who came to me later in their careers. And so, like, there's probably a quarter of my list are writers over 50 who started as debut authors. Maybe, yeah, I think that's about right. And then I also have some people who are so young, they're babies. They're like 22 and 23 and cranking out work that feels very wise and interesting. So it's quite a diverse list.
At what point would you recommend that a debut author starts their querying process?
When your manuscript is complete and you have edited it beyond your ability to edit it any further, and then you edit it again, that's when you query. And I would say not until then. And there, and that looks different. Doesn't mean that it looks polished and it has a big shiny bow on it, It just means you have done every amount of like every ounce of work that you can do because this is, like I said earlier, like this is your business, right? Like I mean, on the one hand, it's your art, but you're trying to make your art a business. And so you really need to take it deeply seriously and you need to invest in yourself and put the time and the effort into the pages because it's extremely competitive. You get queries all the time as an agent, many, 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 too many to count. And many of those books are so worthy and so interesting, and you really have to set yourself apart.
When it comes to people that you represent, when do they start talking to you about new projects? Like, do they get it to the same points as, where they got their original manuscript and then almost like query that new project back to you? Or like, how do you guys go once your presentation?
Once you work with someone, you've kind of been through that. There's much more flexibility to me. So when I take on an author, the hope is that I'm taking you on for the duration of your career, right? Like this is a lifelong arrangement. And listen, if things don't work out, of course, we can part ways, we can have that conversation. But most of the time, what we're doing is committing to each other, and so once we've been through that first book, the process for the second, third, 10th book looks a little different. You kind of come to me with an idea, you can come to me with pages, or you can come to me with a finished manuscript because by that time we will have been through hopefully one publication cycle together. And as a result of that, we know how our relationship works. I have a lot of writers who share chunks of pages. I do not like to sell manuscripts on proposal or on a partial manuscript. I think with literary fiction, it makes it very difficult. I have done it. I don't advise it unless the circumstances are very specific. So I think a complete finished manuscript is what you need. That's the end goal.
So I'm curious, when it comes to deciding on whether to represent an author or not, do you look at their social media? Is that something that's important to you?
I'm going to tell you my answer, and then I'm going to give you perhaps a more useful answer. I am almost a completely offline person. I have no social media. Um, I am not, it overwhelms me. I'm not interested in it. And I just completely shut it out of my life. I do not think that social media is important for literary fiction. I think it's actually a very large waste of time. It drives at the worst of our impulses. So I leave that to the kind of personality of the writer. That is for what I do and the kinds of books that I represent. I spent 12 years working at a boutique literary agency, and we did a certain kind of thing, right? We kind of all worked in literary fiction and narrative nonfiction, and that was who we were. I now work in a large corporate ecosystem, and I have 40 colleagues, at least, and they represent a wide variety of material: commercial fiction, science fiction, narrative nonfiction, cookbooks, comics, like anything you can imagine, we have it. And it's incredible. And so I have a lot of colleagues who work across different genres for whom social media is very important. And it's important for audience development and like building a broad career for a writer and reaching into different markets. And I think that there is, for specific kinds of writing, social media is important. Um, I think the romantasy genre is important. It's very important. And I know in nonfiction it's important, but for my corner of the universe, it matters not at all. Um, 0%.
So I'm curious then, if social media isn't something that's really pulling you towards an author, what do you look for when it comes to deciding who you represent?
Yeah, it's both very simple. It's just very simple. It's excellence on the sentence level.
Yeah.
um, I'm I'm looking for um, I'm looking for a feeling that I get in the opening pages of a book. It's a voice, it's an energy, it's a setting, um, and it really it has to be there. A book doesn't start at page 50. A book starts at page one. It starts at sentence one. Um, I believe that so fully and wholly that I've passed on projects before where the writer is where I've said, I wasn't drawn in by the voice, whatever. And the writer said, but it really picks up at chapter two, like what you're asking for really starts happening. And I said, well, then, chapter two is chapter one. You got to move it. I mean, I can't wait because readers in a bookstore open that book, right? They're reading that first sentence, they're finding the energy, they want their hand on the pulse of something, and you really have to be there. And I one of the coolest things that has ever happened to me ever, well, it didn't happen to me, it happened to my author, and I was lucky enough to be present for it. Um, I was sitting at the National Book Awards, which is this huge award that is given to US writers. Um, the year before, my author had won it. And if you win it, you get to come the next year. You're there, you're invited as a guest. And so she was there um, as a previous winner. And Oprah Winfrey was the MC. And Oprah began her talk by reading or reciting rather the first line of my author's book to cite excellence in fiction. And I was like, and the other book that she did that to was Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead. So she recited the first line of Tess Gunty's The Rabbit Hutch and the first line of Demon Copperhead. And she said, these are the books that draw you in. And it was I still get chills thinking about it, to be in that
Yeah,
room
I
and
got
to watch
goosebumps
my
too.
authors. I know, it was incredible. So that's what I mean, listen, not every book is is gonna win these major awards. There's only one a year, but what I want is that transformative feeling. I knew from sentence one on The Rabbit Hutch that there was something, and that book, that opening line didn't move. That was the first line of the book, and it stayed the whole way through the editorial process. So
You mentioned setting, and that was an interesting word that you used. Are you quite a visual reader? And do you feel like you get two types of readers, because I feel like there's people, well, I would consider myself as somebody who's a lot more pulled through a story by like the dialogue and like what happens and how it happens, as opposed to like it being aesthetically brilliant. Do you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention this. I know you spoke with Katie Yee, who I represent, and she and
Yes.
I laugh often because there's a word for it, but I'm not a visual reader.
Okay.
And neither is Katie, and we always have this in common. We laugh about it. Like we don't I don't know, we just don't see I'm never envisioning it. I'm listening to it. Right? I'm listening to it in my head.
Ah.
I can't build a scene in my head and see it, but it's more of a feeling, which is weird. Yeah.
Ah.
And I
Uh,
also think you get that feeling from a lot, I mean, from a wide genre of books, right? I really understood like this. I read this really fun um, book, The Wedding People, and I loved it. I mean, I thought it was like really pacey and an exciting plot and a great love, a great complex love story. And I just felt like I was in it with them the whole time, right? So I think it happens across the genres. It doesn't have to happen in just this kind of like robust literary fiction. It happens in any good book.
on that, have you picked up any aches throughout your time of reading books? Like if you see certain things in a book, you're like, oh, I can't do this anymore, or like this is gonna make me close a book.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that. I've been thinking about this question a lot because um, I do have icks for things I represent, but the power of good fiction is that sometimes those icks, sometimes I'm wrong about them. So
Uh,
personally, like I am done. I am done. I am done with battered women. I am done with dead children. I just don't read about them at all. And I don't want books about them. I can't do it. I'm pretty much done with assault against women as well. Like I think I'm gonna let other people handle that. Um, and then I just read Hamnet, which, spoiler alert, not a spoiler alert at all, in the jacket copy, it's a book about a kid that dies. And I was like transported and I could not put it down and I wept and I loved every minute of it and it was handled masterfully. So like I say absolutely not under any circumstances, and then the very next book I read just shatters that, and I will be the first person in line to see the movie. I'm dying. I cannot wait. So
are they making a movie of Hamlet?
yes, I didn't know. I finished the book like 2 weeks ago, and the first thing that happened when I opened my news feed is they were like, the trailer for Hamnet has dropped, and I was like, oh, convenient theories for me. This is amazing. So it's coming out in November, and it happened like the second I closed the book, and
Oh
it's
my
Paul
gosh. Well, I'm
Mescal.
gonna I'm gonna YouTube that afterwards and send it to my book club, because the ladies are gonna lose their mind. That's like the first book they recommended to me when I joined the book club. They're like, you have to read this.
It's so good.
Wow. And is there anything that draws you to a book?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. I mean, on a very surface level, like a great jacket, but really like a great pitch, really great jacket copy, and then you open it up and it's that feeling you get, right? So I think the whole package doesn't have to come together, but I think it's really nice when the whole package comes together. You pick it up, you see this, wow, what a jacket. Wow, what a description. And then you open it up and you're like, okay, I'm in, you know.
Mm.
It's just the whole experience. And I think that was born for me. I mean, I think most people are lifetime readers, right? So I've been thinking about that my whole life, but I was a bookseller, and that is really where I learned to love like the entirety of a book package and really kind of understand why a reader walks to a book and what kind of readers walk to what books. And we used to stand behind the register and be like, she's going to walk over there. That person wants that, you know? And the best is when we were wrong. But after a while, you kind of know. You kind of know. But people really can surprise you what they're drawn to. So.
I'm curious about how involved you are in the entire process. Like, do you get to the point where you have influence over what the book looks like? Could you maybe paint a picture for us what the process is from when you sign an author to the point of them getting their book published?
Sure. I think so those were kind of a two-part questions. The first part being how involved I am in the process of like the visual process of the book and the like the
Yeah, because I would assume that's more towards the end of the process, wouldn't that
yeah,
be?
absolutely. And I think so an agent's job is to advocate, right? So
Right.
I and contractually most of the time authors have consultation rights, not control over their jacket. And that means that they're heavily involved in the process, but ultimately the publisher creates the jacket and signs off on it. And so this is pretty important for why you want a good relationship with your agent. I can listen to you and say, this is really not working. You know, you're telling me that this jacket is making you feel this way, or like that these are the things that are most important to you. And it's easier for the publisher usually to hear that coming from an agent who is perhaps less emotionally involved, since we didn't create the work. And also, part of the goal of an agent is to make sure that there's like that there's goodwill. There's like a goodwill train from the author to the publishing house. So I'm everything that comes from me, should be supportive, encouraging, firm when it needs to be. And I kind of provide that buffer because I think creating art is such a deeply personal process. I think you want someone one step removed to really be able to ride for you so that you can preserve your art and your kind of well-being during this process, which is like, it's a little bit of a strenuous process, right? It's a heavy lift. You've edited the novel, with me, hopefully only once or twice, but maybe 500 times. And then you've edited it with your professional editor, who is far better than me, 500 more times, hopefully only once or twice, but as many as it takes. And then, it's like we're going over like comma by comma. Copy editors are geniuses. And then it's like, okay, you're done. Here's the jacket. And then you're like, oh my God, this is the visual representation of my book. It's so emotional. It's overwhelming. And many times the publisher gets it really right. But a lot of times they get it really wrong first, right? And so you have to, it's like, it can be very quite jarring. I have seen tears of joy and I have seen tears of sadness. And the goal is to really find a polite way to get to the tears of joy.
Do you find that sometimes, because I mean, I've even seen with Katie's book, like she's got two completely different covers, one for the US and one for, I think, UK and international.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to the point where an author's like, okay, well, just please for like, just for this area, can it be this? It must be very difficult to interact with people who are perhaps publishing it in a different continent. Like,
Yeah.
how involved can you be?
I think the number one rule is to remember that when you are published in another country, and this is the answer to a lot of questions about publishing in translation, you are always an author in translation, or at least in other English speaking countries, but I mean you're still a foreign author, right? So it is it is an extra layer of complication because you are entering a market and a culture that may use the same language or look a little similar, but it is wildly different. UK and Australian readers have very different tastes than Americans. And it's important to be respectful and to remember that. Your market asks for and appreciates different things, and I have to trust that the publishers and the on-the-ground advocates for this work in France and Germany and the UK and Australia really understand what will draw a reader to a book better than me. And
Yeah.
so we really kind of hold by that. And I trust the process. Now that doesn't mean I won't say visually this jacket is just a no, but if it's a jacket that has been, considered thoughtfully and the editor says this is what we think our readers would be drawn to, who am I to say? I don't live there. I don't engage on the ground with readers in a bookshop in these countries. So I have to trust the process. And I encourage my authors to do the same thing. And also, like on that note, not to take for granted how difficult it is to be an author in translation in another country. I think I spend a lot of time talking to my authors openly about, they're like, why hasn't my book sold in, this country or that country? And I'm like, well, just think when the last time you picked up a book in translation. Like, who's the last, even not in translation, like, who's the last UK author, Australian author, who's the last French author you picked up in a bookstore and read? That's what you're asking them to do for you. So, it's a much, it's a truncated audience. And you have to be kind of respectful of the marketplace.
Okay. Very fair. And now, could you walk me through your process of how you would typically work with one of your newer authors?
Yeah, absolutely. It starts with the manuscript. I read it and I think it through, and in my head, I'm thinking about like basically what is this going to look like on the shelf. Mostly at first, I'm thinking I'm obsessed with this book and I can't live without it. And then I'm like, what is it going to look like? Who are the editors who are going to love this book and take care of this book? And I'm building a list in my head and I'm so enthusiastic. And then I reach out to the author and we usually meet, talk, speak editorially about the book a little bit. And then I kind of make the pitch for why I think I'd be the best advocate for the book. And then they go off and think about it. And then they say, yes, of course, let's do this, which is very exciting. And then we get to work. Right. And then I usually send like a big edit if it needs it. So then we go through the editorial process. We get it as tight as we can. And then I send it out. And we just like wait for those editors to get back to us. And I have this one author I took on earlier this year, and we're in the middle of, a round of edits with her right now. And I remember reading the book, and I actually, when I was trying to sign her, I actually told her, I will literally die if you don't let me represent you. I will never survive. And she was like, that's a lot of pressure. And I was like, I know, but 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 this is it. Like this is gonna be this is the book, right? And it is, and it will be. So
How long on average? I mean, I've heard it's a really long process, but then also listening to Katie, it can also be a very quick process.
yeah.
So, like, typically, from your experience, like, what is the market currently, and has it changed a lot over the last 5 years?
Yes, I think the market has changed dramatically since I've been in the business. I think a lot of that has to do with people's attention spans and people's tastes and kind of the things that they want to escape into, and that's impacted by all sorts of things like what's going on in the world and where people are getting their information, and of course, and like and how they want to spend their time, right? But the process of buying and selling a book can take anywhere from like 5 minutes, right? Like no time at all. Like the book is done and it sells immediately and hooray. But it can also take years, right? Like it can be a slog. I mean, fiction, especially, can take a long time. And sometimes books don't sell on the first round of submissions. And then you have to really listen to why that is and what editors have said. And then you go back in and you think, like, how can we address these issues broadly? To perhaps catch something that we missed the first time. And then, I've sold books that I mean, it's taken several years to sell a book that has turned out to be wildly successful before. But it's also taken, like I think we sold Katie's book in like 4 days. I mean, it was very silly. It was like really wonderful. And it doesn't mean one book is better or more worthy or more interesting. It just means that that's where people were at the time. Maybe we caught editors when they were busy. Maybe it was the wrong season. Maybe the main character of the book just needed one more push that we didn't see the first time. The timing doesn't mean anything. Nobody's ever read a book or like finished a book and closed that novel and said, you know what? That book would have been so much better if it were published 8 months ago. I would have enjoyed it so much better if it had sold a little faster. No one's going to say that. They're just going to be glad they read it.
On that, I get super into one author. And then what I find is often like the first book was so good. And then somehow it feels like often, not all the time, that the later novels are a little bit watered down. Why do
Really?
you think something like that could happen? Do you feel like, because maybe somebody gets like too big too quickly, and then like, how are you able to always be completely honest?
Yeah, that's tough. That could be for a lot of reasons. One, because something worked, and we see this a lot in television shows and movies as well. Like when one thing works, just do it 500 times. And I think that that's not a super smart way to create art. Right. I think exactly what you're saying happens. Not that it's a money grab. I think that readers are smarter than that. And they
Mm.
need, what drew them in for book one isn't what's going to keep them there for book five. It's a vibe that they got, and I think the writer, the author, the filmmaker, the producers will have to find what that vibe is, what that heartbeat is, and find a different way to present it. Because you're right. I mean, I think if you're doing the same thing over and over again, readers are going to get quite bored. That doesn't happen as much in literary fiction because writers are much slower. So like 3, 4, 5 years between books and they're reinventing worlds. I think it happens when you get these brilliant, like there is a real genius to being an author that's able to put out a book every 18 months. I think there's a lot of pressure on them to keep that, keep working at that level because they're hitting that bestseller list and that, they're feeding their fans. But you're right. I mean, there's a real danger to it.
Yeah, because I often say to my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just wish it had been through maybe like 3 more edits, like just 3 more edits, because then it would have been like there. But it's like they're like, no, this is good enough, and I'm like, yeah, it is good enough, but like I'm a mom, I don't have that much time,
Um,
like why don't you just take it there? It's it would have been so great.
it's one of the dark sides of our industry. It's a business and people are trying to make money. And if the first like John Smith book sold like 500,000 copies, John Smith is going to write that book again because he's going to sell 500,000 or 650 million. I mean, it just if it works, it's like if the shoe fits, buy it in every color. It's like not a great business model, but it is a way. I think it's a way for publishers to build a brand author, and there's a lot of financial upside to that for them. Um,
Okay. I feel very challenged by what you just said because I have like 4 projects that are similar but different.
yeah,
So like they very similar. So I'm like, oh no, are mine all too similar now?
I don't know. I
um
mean, it's the vibe, right? It's if you've got 4 projects, like you got to just really find the heartbeat of that. And I don't know, I haven't read enough of a few different authors whose names are in my head right now to really cite them. But it
yeah.
seems like from the little that I know about like someone like Taylor Jenkins Reid, right?
Mm,
From what I know about her books, they seem extremely varied, right? So it seems like she's the
yeah.
kind of author who has like like she's got the heartbeat. She knows what people want. Like there's something propulsive about it, but like the books are set in wildly different ways. They're dealing with longing and desire and pain and love and all these different things in wildly different settings. And so, like maybe looking like to an example like that rather than someone who's kind of repeating the plot in every book, right? I don't.
Oh, okay. Could you please share maybe 3 good questions that you feel like an author should ask an agent before agreeing to sign with them?
Yeah. Let's see. First, you want to ask the agent to talk editorially about the work, right? Like you want to know how the agent sees your work. And you want that to feel like a dialogue. It would be terrible to be speaking with an agent who is talking to you about your work, and then you say, I don't see my work in that way, you know? So you really want to make sure you're on the same page editorially. I also think it's really important to have a conversation about how you want to work as a business partnership. I run, for instance, a very different business than like my colleagues who do the exact same thing as me. I have a different relationship with my authors than a lot of them do. And I came up a certain way and learned to do the work in a certain way. And the end result is the same, but I have a smaller list and I keep my list small because I feel very personally connected to a lot of to all of my authors, and I want to be available for them as they're writing. It means keeping that list tight. But somebody else may come to me and say, I want an agent who's like a little more cut and dry. Like I want this, like, here's my book. Let's do a round of edits, get it out the door. Like we don't need this back and forth. I don't need you to like throw Christmas parties for your like New York author. Yeah, you don't always need that. And I guess the third question, I don't really know. What would you, I'm going to kick it back to you. Like, what's a question that you would want to, like, what am I missing? What should I be asking authors or making sure authors are asking me?
I'm just curious, do you expect an author to stay in their lane, or would you be open to an author trying something else? And if it's not something you typically represent, would you then maybe share them with someone else? How would you work like that?
It's a great question. And one of the benefits of being at a large agency is that I have a lot of brilliant colleagues who do things that I don't do. So this has happened. I'm able to say, "Oh, you've written a children's book." I read a lot of children's books because I have children, but I think that this is an art form that I don't fully understand. Let me bring my colleague in. I'm going to have her take a look at it, and if it's something that that she kind of believes in as much as I would need to, we'll do it together. And so you'll have this kind of partner for this part of your career. Alternatively, if you really want to go outside of your genre, like say, I signed you for literary fiction and your heart is really in fantasy, right? Uh I it might be a good opportunity for me to say, maybe you should look at other agents. This is not a firing situation. It's just that I've read precisely one book of the Asimov Foundation series, and that is literally all that I know about this. And I'm no longer a good advocate for you because there are rules of this genre that I don't understand, you know? And so I wouldn't even know who to send this to, and then I would be doing a disservice. So like there are a couple of things, we can partner up with someone, you can seek someone else for this part of your career. Like if you really need to write bloody horror, like we can find someone who represents that. You can come back to me, or, you know, perhaps we just move on. It's been a really nice run and we'll think fondly of these books. So I think that there's no cut and dry answer. But if it's kind of like within what I understand about books, and if it's within the genre of books that I read and I know the editors for and I know how to edit, I can flex a little, right? Like if something's quite a bit more commercial or quite a bit more experimental, and I can still say, I get it. I know who edits this kind of work. I know what publishers will want this. I can still do my job by being your advocate, you know? So I think it just really depends on what the lane is.
Okay.
Because I'd love to see artists grow and change and think outside of what they originally thought was their genre or their box. But yeah, when it starts impacting my ability to advocate, you don't want to be with me anyway, right? That's not useful to you.
So, what would you say are maybe your top three genres that you love? And if you could recommend three books to my audience that you're just like, you have to read this, what
Sure.
would you recommend?
Oh gosh, am I allowed to recommend books that I represent? That seems
Yes.
bad.
Yes.
Um, so I represent literary fiction, and then that's usually what I read. So let's see. So like I'm looking at all of my books that I represent are on this shelf over here, and now I'm kind of like I can't only pick one baby. So I would say I'm going to recommend in literary fiction Kavai Strong Washburn's Sharks in the Time of Saviors. I know a couple of reasons. One, it was published widely around the world, so whoever's watching this will have easy access to it. It was translated into a lot of different languages. It did very well in Australia and the UK as well, so like you can get your hands on it. Also, he has another book coming out in the fall of 2026, so it's a good time to learn about him as a writer. And if you like him, his next book will come out, which is great. So in that space, that's like big-hearted family saga set in a beautiful place. It's got some elements of magical realism in it, and it really looks at the impact of a major, nearly catastrophic event on a family and how it impacts the family over the course of 20 years. And a lot of my books have a similar pitch, like how this one event spiraled out over the course of years. I love that kind of micro and macro level. I also have been having a lot of fun in the crime and thriller genre, which I don't represent a ton of. Um, but I love to read in it. I just went way back to Raymond Chandler, which is kind of old school, but I'm trying to think of a great crime novel that's contemporary that I read recently. I'd read the new essay Cosby, which was pretty dark. It was called The King of Ashes. Um, and I enjoyed that, but it was quite dark. I am very interested in the crime and thriller space. And then in the kind of like upmarket commercial fiction space, I read The Wedding People and I thought it was really fun and well paced. I don't know where Liz Moore's God of the Wood fits into that. I don't know kind of what genre we're calling that, but what I will say is it was a masterclass in pacing Like that was one of the most well-paced books I've ever read. I loved like I just was ripping through it, you know. And The Wedding People was fun tonally. The dialogue was really sharp, and you know, you're dying to find out what happened. So yeah,
Well, thank you so much for your
of
time. I
course.
really, really appreciated this.